now we move on to the second act of the night. I believe it's Spalding Gray.
Oh, where we're going, but we don't know where we've been, and we know what we're knowing, but we can't say what we've seen, and we're not little children, and we know what we want, and the future is certain. Give us time to work it out.
Did you get by?
Not really, sorry.
Oh, I thought I could wiggle it in, but I can't.
Thank you.
There you go.
We're on the road to nowhere. Come on inside. Taking that ride to nowhere. We'll take that ride. Feeling okay this
After all that setup, I feel like I should just pack everything up and go. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here on a Saturday night despite the cure and various proms happening all over the city. This is Spalding Gray,
everywhere.
improvised, autobiographical, free associative monologue in the style of Spalding Gray. If you don't know who Spalding Gray is, well, he was a monologist, and he believed that the performer should be the subject of the performance to some degree. I have his theatrical trappings on stage with me tonight. A desk, a microphone, a glass of water, and a notebook. Slightly different from Spalding Gray, he prepared his monologues. This is an improvised autobiographical free associative monologue. Autobiographical, everything you're going to hear tonight are things that happened to me. They are true stories, they are real stories. Free associative, I'm going to hop from thing to thing. I might tell an entire story from beginning to end, but I reserve the right to skip around in the event that I think of something else while I'm talking. And the most important part, improvise. In order to get going tonight, I will need your help. First, from you, I need a suggestion. I need a word ending in ing that is not ending.
Dancing.
Dancing. Thank you. Dancing. And now I need a location. It can be a city, it can be a famous site, preferably something in that realm, like a famous landmark or a city. Something.
St. Louis Arch.
St. Louis Arch? What does the St. Louis Arch make you think of?
A cross-country road trip.
Interesting. And not the film Vacation? Thank you. And now I need a year between 1978 and 2019.
1998.
1998. Thank you so much, everyone. Everyone, I present Dancing Beneath the St. Louis Arch. I've only been to the St. Louis Arch once, and I wasn't even in there. I used to work for a company called Elsevier, the largest science and technology publisher in the world, headquartered in Amsterdam. I never went to Amsterdam, though. They never sent me. I did, however, go to Philadelphia, New York, Orlando, and St. Louis. We had offices there. Mostly the health sciences division was there. And the very first time I went, they saw fit to take all of us that were visiting from the San Diego office on a tour of the city. Now, there are a bunch of things that you need to know about St. Louis that are wonderful. First of all, it's a big blues city, so you would think that we would go there. It is also, I believe, the city in which, I may be misremembering. I have the right to do that. I often do. I often misremember things. I believe it is the city in which the courtroom where the Dred Scott case was decided was. I believe they pointed that out. It's also a city with a tremendous park, roughly the size of Balboa Park, and I don't remember anything about that. But you know what I do remember? I remember two things. One, that the river, the Mississippi River, had overflowed its banks just prior to our arrival and had wiped out good sections of the city. And secondly, that the St. Louis Arch at that time was closed for unknown reasons. So you know what we did? We rode around the city in a bus. Yes. You would think that this place would have private tours set aside for corporate visitors and that sort of thing. No, they did get us a coach, and we rode around the city driving past everything that I have just described and stopping at absolutely none of it. So imagine, if you will, that I'm in a bus with a bunch of colleagues that I do not know because they work in the St. Louis office. I believe our royalties department was there. Imagine talking to royalties folks, you know, what you pay authors. The last thing the company wants to do is pay its authors. Why? Because capitalism, of course, let's face it. And otherwise, I'm with people who would normally be demonized in the corporate world. I'm with all of the attorneys. Why? Because I work for them. I work in the contracts group. I have to tell you that attorneys, for the most part, especially corporate attorneys, are actually very lovely people. These are very fun-loving people. Everybody wanted to go to a baseball game. We did not go. Why? Because we were in the bus that was never ending. It just kept driving around and not stopping anywhere. I was with the general counsel. I was with my boss. I was with the boss of the health sciences department. All of these people, by the way, women. Fantastic, powerful, strong, awesome women. My boss brought me up from nowhere. When I first started at the company, I was an assistant, an executive assistant to the senior vice president. And she and I got along not at all. And so what happened was, I thought I was very good at communicating. I thought I could deal with anybody. I thought I could talk to anybody. And then I encountered this senior vice president, who, by the way, interviewed me, hired me, and then promptly after I was hired, indicated that she didn't want an executive assistant. And so I was left to figure out what my role was in the company. Well, it turns out about 6 months into that job, my role was to go to the contracts department because she did not need an executive assistant and I could not figure out how to help her in any way. Just imagine somebody who is dead set, who knows exactly what she wants and refuses to tell you. I can't deal with that. I don't understand that. I can't process that. And she knew and did not care. So, a few months later, I find myself working in the contracts group. A few years after that, I find myself in St. Louis, driving around with, among other people, my boss at the time. And she convinces the bus driver to take us to, and I cannot remember the name of this place, but it was a little cafe out of in the middle of nowhere. It is populated entirely with all these little tiny, like, just imagine like a combination of like bottle caps and glass bottles and weird accoutrements, like action figures, little dolls everywhere. Just this very bizarre and very kind of groovy space, you know? One of these little weird places that you would want tourists to see, but tourists probably don't see because it's tucked away in some neighborhood where visitors don't go. And why? I don't know. Maybe because the buses don't stop anywhere ever. But anyway, if I could remember the name of this place, I would tell you, and I would tell you to go there because it was a lovely experience. We had cocktails. I love old fashions. I ordered an old fashioned and it was fantastic. Anything is really wonderful after you've been riding around in a never-ending bus. And I sat there and I stood and I talked to not only my general counsel and even the royalties person who wanted to talk about nothing, as I recall, except all of the problematic provisions in our contracts that she hated because they impeded paying royalties properly, or they were difficult to decipher, and it was hard to explain to her that they're deliberately on a corporate level difficult to decipher because you don't want to pay authors, really. You would think that she would be in on that whole thing, but no, it was a mystery to her. It turns out that most of corporate America is a mystery to those who are most deeply entrenched in it. And it was in that same evening where there was a handoff actually taking place, because I was going to report, I had just become a supervisor, and I was going to report to the health science manager, who was there along with the life sciences manager. And my former boss, the science and technology, life sciences manager, and the health sciences manager, both just incredibly wonderful people. And I thanked my boss, my previous boss, for trusting me, believing in me. Her name is Jacqueline. And I don't know why she picked me. She could have chosen anybody. She interviewed other people around the company, but she picked me. And in that night, in that evening, I didn't know why, but I wanted to thank her, and I did. I thanked her. It's not usual in a corporate environment, you know, you don't want to spill your guts everywhere, you don't want to in front of your colleagues necessarily. You want to keep it together, keep it reined in, be cool. There's something in me that won't allow me to do that, but that also won't let me be terribly sloppy. No matter how many old fashions I had had. And I only had one. Why? Because it's a corporate event, and you never know when the bus might stop again. You gotta be cool and use the bathroom before you get back on the bus. But anyway, I was very happy that night that in the incredible St. Louis heat, I don't know if anybody's been to St. Louis, but there is a wall of humidity that exists in St. Louis that I have not experienced anywhere else. My wife is from New Jersey. I had been to New Jersey. I went to Orlando, as I mentioned earlier in the monologue, for another corporate event, and we spent time outside in Orlando. And you would think that Orlando, being the jungle, swamp, hellscape that Florida is, would be the premier destination for horrible wall-like humidity, right? And it probably is, but not when I was there. It had moved to St. Louis in the meantime. When I walked off the plane first in St. Louis at the beginning of this whole thing, I should have known. It set the tone immediately. I stepped off the plane and boom! And it literally, it punched me in the face. How hot and humid it was. It was terrifying. I'm from here. I'm one of 5 people from San Diego.
That's true.
I can't take weather. That's not true. I do love a rain.
Come on out with me.
I do love a marine lair. Oh, I love a marine lair. May Gray and June gloom is my jam. You know what is not my jam? The wall of humidity that exists in St. Louis. I showed up there and I thought, for sure, it's in the middle of the country. What could possibly be there? Luckily, there were no tornadoes that week. St. Louis was the first place I had experienced where, when I walked into the building, when I walked into, first of all, the wall of air conditioning, which was the most beautiful thing I have ever felt in my entire life. If you haven't done this, I highly recommend it. Fly into Phoenix sometime, step outside, and then just walk right back inside. Wonderful feeling in the universe. When I walked into the office in St. Louis, I went to the bathroom, and one of the first things I saw was a tornado sign, where it's like, if a tornado happens, gather here. In the safe part of the bit, I can't even remember what it said, but I just remember thinking there is a sign that has a literal tornado, not a literal tornado. It's got a figurative tornado that makes you think of literal tornadoes outside. And it says, be in this spot if anything goes wrong. I don't need to be in a place that has that sign in it. I'm from here. Give me May Gray and June gloom any day, but I'm not there. I'm in St. Louis. not stopping underneath the arch. Why? Because, I don't know, the driver had things to do. But he certainly took us to this place. And after that lovely moment where I was able to thank my boss for bringing me on board for reasons that are still totally unclear to me, she just thought I would do a good job. And I guess I was. I'd been promoted. I was so grateful. Immediately after that, we all went to a place, and I cannot remember the name of this place. Damn my memory. It's a very famous frozen custard place that only exists. There are only 2 locations, and they're both in St. Louis. They have something called the Concrete. Have you not heard of the Concrete? We hadn't either. But they sell something called the Concrete. And after the lovely gathering at the wildly eclectic cafe, we went to this place, the name of which escapes me, but there are only 2 locations, both in St. Louis. If you find yourself in St. Louis, mention the Concrete and they'll probably take you there. Or they'll take you around the city a bunch first and then take you there. And we're standing outside, and I remember there was a lovely man, my counterpart on the health sciences side. His name was Jeff. I'm standing there with Jeff and my old boss and my new boss. We're all looking at the sign, and he says, "What's the Concrete?" Just to nobody. And clearly, by the way, this place is packed. It's like, at this point, it's about 11 o'clock at night. This place is open until about 2 o'clock in the morning, which is genius when you've encountered the wall of humidity and heat that is St. Louis. Just cars and people everywhere. Like it's this little square building that is right on the the side of the street. There's a wide sidewalk, and there are people just spilling out into the street, and cars are driving around the people because they know it's a landmark in St. Louis. Ted Drew's. Ha! Ted Drew's. You find yourself in St. Louis, Ted Drew's. My friend Jeff, my counterpart Jeff, just idly says, "Oh, it's the Concrete." The local overhears him. The local says, "It's the Concrete." And we all have that look, like there's more. Yeah? The local says, "It's what they're famous for." And walks away. It was the most brilliant thing I've ever seen, maybe in my life. We all, around Jeff, we all just burst into laughter and just, walked away from him at the genius, the notion that this local guy had, that it's the Concrete. You have to know what the Concrete is, and it's a fair point. What were we doing at Ted Drew's at 11 o'clock on a weeknight if we don't know what the Concrete is? Point St. Louis. We get back in line after we gather ourselves together. The Concrete, it turns out, is frozen custard. It's so intense and so thick that when they pour it in the little tray, what they do to prove to you how intense it is, they take it right in front of your face and turn it upside down to show that it all stays in there. Why does it do that? It's the Concrete. Flip it right back over. And then as soon as it hits the humid air, but until that moment, it's the Concrete. And it's pure genius. We all ordered the Concrete. We all ate the Concrete. We sat there in the humid, somewhat horrifying St. Louis night. All of us gathered together from all over the country, Orlando, Philadelphia, New York, San Diego, even some folks from St. Louis. We all sat there. And we enjoyed the concrete, all of us together. Years later, we would tell that story to each other. We would especially invoke it whenever something was particularly clear to one of us, but not to everybody else. We'd just say, as shorthand, it's the concrete. Oh, I get it. It's the concrete. It's strange. It's strange what you do and experience with coworkers. You know, you really don't have any other relationships like that in your life. You're forced to be together with a bunch of people with whom you have very little in common necessarily, but you're all bound together by a common experience of the workplace. In the summer of 1998, I worked in two theaters, live theaters in Los Angeles, the Shubert Theater and the Geffen Playhouse. I worked the box office at the Geffen, and I worked as an usher at the Shubert Theater. And that summer, at the Shubert Theater, which doesn't exist anymore, by the way, it's in Century City. If you look it up, it is gone. The Shubert Theater was the revival of Chicago. And every night, I got to see, I love Bob Fosse. He's of course dead. He was not there. But one of his dancers that was in All That Jazz was there, dancing in the show. I did not talk to her once, but every night, every afternoon, every show, whenever she came out, I just was, oh, Sandal Bergman. One of the ushers who worked there all the time took me under his wing. We had many adventures together. He knew a guy who owned an Irish pub in Santa Monica, and one night after a show, we all went there and we stayed late. Because he knew the guy, we stayed until after the bar closed. We were wasted, super drunk. Dancing late at night in an Irish bar, and we all made jokes about Chicago and how our dancing was terrible, even though we've been watching Chicago nonstop. Santa Monica night is very different from a St. Louis night. There's no concrete. There's no horrible humidity. There's no St. Louis Arch. The bus stops wherever you want it to. There was no dancing in St. Louis. There was dancing. There was dancing in Century City at the Shubert. There was dancing in Santa Monica. There was dancing between all those lives. My life in 1998, my life in the future with all those people I worked with. United by a common goal, common relationships. And here we are tonight. All of us, none of us dancing, but all of us united. On a Saturday night, enjoying one another, hopefully. I've enjoyed my time with you. Our stories are ephemeral and impermanent, and I'm glad I got to share some of them with you tonight. I've been Spalding Gray, and I thank you very much. Have a good night. Everyone, thank Thank you so much for joining me tonight, and thank you so much for being here for, you should have gone to Applebee's if you were here to see Willis and Fjordash and all the performances that were here earlier tonight. Thank you so much. The theater really thrives on your patronage and your goodwill. So please, tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell anybody who will listen. Tell them about us. Hope you enjoyed tonight. I certainly enjoyed having you here. Thank you.
Thank you.
And good night. Go home safe.